Today we're going to discuss measuring for an outside mount coupled shade system. This is going to be a 110 volt AC Intelli-shade system. We're going to go through the process of how to measure for a coupled system and also incorporating in the mix just measurements in general in terms of best practices. So I'm going to head up here to the left and go left to right. That's best practice number one. The other thing I'm going to do is measure high. So that's best practice number two. Always make sure you measure at the very top where the brackets are going to be mounted. Drywall varies, as we know. If you measure down low and there's a variance in the drywall, your measurement at the top will not be the same. 9 times out of 10, it is not. So save yourself the headache. Get up high, get a ladder, get up there tall enough so you can measure along the top where the brackets go with roll shades. That's what matters the most. The rest of it isn't really that important. Make sure you measure the top. So I'll show you how to do that now. So I'm going to get up here on the ladder, get close, and there's a couple different ways you can go about doing this. Now, if I'm doing this by myself, I want to take that into consideration. Method number one would be for me to make a mark in the middle of that mullion, which is where my break is going to be, and then I can measure to that mark. So just a quick example. What I can do is I can go over there real quick. I'll just show you. Move my ladder real quick. And if I measure the width of this mullion, it's 2 inches. So I know that halfway is 1 inch. What I can do with my pencil is make a mark at 1 inch. So I know that mark is in the middle of that mullion. So I measure from the far left to the middle of this mullion. That's going to be the measurement for the left panel of my 2-on-1 coupled system. This is going to be a 2 panels on 1 motor system, which we refer to as a 2-on-1 coupled system. So that's one method. I'll take you through that real quick. So make sure you have a good sturdy tape measure so you can go really wide. This is a Stanley 25 footer, so that's a pretty good job. The Fat Max tape measures are even better. I'm going to go far left to my mark. Okay? If we look at where that mark is, I've got a measurement there. It's also helpful to get in front of it and not try and read it from an angle. If you're straight on, 79 3/8 is what I get. So what I would do is I would jot that down for my left side. Then what I would do is measure from the far right where my shade is going to, where my shade bracket's going to stop. So I'm going to have my shade bracket go to the far right of that mullion. Okay, with the bracket to fabric gap, that means that the shade fabric's going to fall right in the middle of that mullion, because the bracket to fabric gap is 1 inch. Okay, so if I want to go about it like this, I measure from the edge of the mullion where my bracket's going to go to the center point that I made a mark. We're at 59.5. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to double check to make sure that the 2 individual measurements that we took add up to the overall width measurement. Always best to do this to check to make sure that your math is correct, and that way you don't have any sort of issue in terms of a mismeasurement. It's just a good way to do a double check. So I'm going to pull this all the way over to the far right side where that shade bracket's going to go. I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to hold it in place here. Meanwhile, I'm going to stretch more tape out of my tape measure. I'm going to use my teeth. Not recommended, but it works for me. My dentist and I don't get along very well anyways. Okay, so we're going to stretch it all the way over here. We're going to get a measurement of 138 3/4. So that is my overall measurement, 138 3/4. I'm going to notate that, I should say. And if I add the other 2 measurements together, I get 138 7/8 compared to 138 3/4. Not uncommon to be off by 1/8. So normally what I would suggest is if it's an inside mount, go with your narrower measurement. If it's an outside mount, you can go with the wider measurement. So I'm going to go with the 138 7/8. And now I know what my individual panel sizes are, and I also have a matching overall width. So when you place that order with us, We don't have to come back to you and say, hey, there's a problem, things don't add up, okay? That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is you can measure from the left to the left side of the mullion. So here, so if I'm at 78.25, okay, to the left side of the mullion, then what I can do is, I'll make a note of that. I want to add an inch to it because I know that I measured only to here. I need to add an inch so that I'm back to the center. And then what I can do is I can come over to the other side and I can measure from the outside edge, the face of the mullion that I measured to, and I can measure to the outside edge of this mullion, which gives me 60.5. I'm sorry, to the inside edge of this, 58.5. Because if I were to move that over an inch, like so, we'd be at 58.5. Now the thing I want you to remember is that is a center point to center point measurement. If you go outside edge to inside edge, that's a center to center measurement. In this case, we're not going center to center on the right side, we're actually going to the edge. So what you want to do here is go 60.5, and we're going to deduct an inch, okay, which would be the midpoint over here. So you'd be at 59.5. So again, you can do it both ways. Whatever works best for you. You can make the mark like we did before. Sometimes it's difficult to make that work because you can't see exactly where that mark is if you're on the other side. It's easier to just get your tape measure hooked to the mullion or frame and pull it over. If you go outside edge to inside edge, okay, you're going to be essentially obtaining a center to center measurement. Now, lastly, we're going to do the height. So on the height, not as critical to be perfect. We want to give ourselves about 1/4 inch off the floor for clearance. So I'm going to measure to the top here from the floor. We're at 118. So I'm going to take 1/4 inch off because you certainly don't want the fabric sitting on the floor. We'll be at 117.75. Okay, so our overall measurement on this system, excuse me, is 138.75 by 117.75. Got our width, we have our length, so we're good on measuring this outside mount 2-on-1 coupled shade system. Hopefully that was as fun for you as it was for me. We'll get going on our next steps in the next module. See you then.